I'm delighted and honoured for this episode of What the Lux to have the formidable Anthea Peers on the podcast. A lady who I seem to have spent the last month in about 6 different countries with, listening to you speak.
We should qualify that why at many different locations.
Yes, we probably should qualify
panel
that
discussions.
why.
Yes.
And
the pleasure is mine, Anant. It's been so lovely to see you there.
Absolutely. I've seen you in Venice. I've seen you in Riyadh.
That's right.
I've seen you in... is that it?
I think that's it. Now UK.
Dubai,
now we've added
the
UK.
And I saw you at the Walpole Summit.
Yes,
of course.
there you go.
Speak very, very well. Anthea, you've had an amazing career at Christie's, spanning, I think, 17 years.
That's right.
Am I right?
That's right.
In saying that? And you've really risen through the business in all sorts of different roles and departments. Can you just tell us a bit about your journey and how you came to be president, EMEA, of Christie's? Which is arguably the most prestigious auction house in the world.
Arguably, I would certainly agree it is. No, thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I so enjoy the podcast that you do, and it's a real pleasure to be here. My interest in art was actually sparked by my aunt, my great aunt, bless her. She was an art historian. She was based in Ireland, and she really was. If you think I'm formidable, you should have met my dear Aunt Anne. She was absolutely extraordinary, and she really pioneered art history, particularly for Irish artists. And so she travelled the land finding underrepresented artists, pictures, and she really forced the purchase of contemporary artists at the time. So she was a great inspiration to me as a person, but also I was so lucky that she took my sister and I around exhibitions. And the value of that is that she opened the door to art for me. So she would take me around and she would signpost for me, you know, if you look for this, it means that, or why don't you count this, or have you seen what the Virgin and Child looks like? It was a wonderful opener for my sister and I, and it created the curiosity and the passion that continued in our life. And I think for me, when someone opens the door to the art world, it's a bit like learning to read. Suddenly you discover the enormity that is out there, and you have a forever passion that is always going to keep you interested and is going to stimulate you. So from there, I studied history of art at university, and my professor at university said to me, you have a very commercial mind. You should consider the commercial business. And to be clear, he was not giving me a compliment. In fact, quite the opposite. But I took it, and I took the hint. And so I went into the commercial art world, first in galleries, and then 17 years ago at Christie's, where I started as a PA.
What an incredible journey. To begin as PA and then now to be president.
Well, 17 years. It's quite a long time. I mean, I was working away. I've been working very hard for 17 years, and I am only just getting started.
I'm sure you are just getting started. Was there like a particular piece that first sort of set your heart alight?
I think, do you know, there was, when in one of my early roles, I was working in the Impressionist department, and there was a beautiful Picasso portrait of someone that he had been hanging out with in the bars. And there was something about the way that portrait used to look out, something about his face, something about his eyes, and I found it absolutely mesmerizing. It was the De Soto portrait. And I had always been passionate about art, but for me, I think that's where there was a crossover between something utterly beautiful in front of me and imagine if I could own that. Imagine if that could be on my wall, which it clearly can't because it's worth millions and millions and millions of pounds. But as a concept, it was a great moment for me.
But you are only just getting started.
I'm just getting started. So actually, one day it will be mine, of course. Thank you. That's right, yeah.
Can we just go to the 101s of like how an auction house functions? Can you just talk to what Christie's does, what its core business is, its mission, its purpose? Just if you could just contextualize how Christie's operates.
Thank you. And look, sometimes people have heard of us maybe because of a particular price, but actually if you roll back, we started very differently. We were opened in 1766 by a man called James Christie. And if you look back into our archives, you can actually see his written books where he's made notes about buying hay before the auction so that the horses have something to eat while their owners go in to bid. And we now have a cafetiere, and I rather think that us serving coffee to clients is a sort of mirror of the hay. But James Christie started selling bits of furniture, home items. And then over time, the business has evolved to become an international organisation. We are present in 46 countries, and we offer something like 70 different categories of art. So that ranges from the beautiful jewellery to watches to blue chip paintings, so your Impressionist, modern, to old masters, right through to extraordinary things like dinosaur bones. We once sold a Spitfire, it's a personal favourite of mine, and a number of different items, particularly collection sales. But if that's what we're doing and that's what's up front, front, what's actually the basis of that is expertise. So we are made up of a group of experts, and they can come into your house and they know your artist. They know the picture, they know where it's from, they can analyze it, they know the buyers. And so it's that expertise which allows us to bring works for auction. We know how, we know where, and we know the works intimately. If that's the first pillar of what we do, the second pillar is about our client relationships. It's about the collectors that we work with, both bringing their works to sell and then finding them works to sell. And those relationships are incredibly serious. It's about trust. And relationships take a long time to form. They take time to build, and we take them incredibly seriously. They are the absolute bedrock of what we're doing. And then the third pillar, which I would say is an evolution probably of the last decade, is about where Christie sits in the ecosystem of art. It's not enough that we are our own organisation. We have to give back. We have to be part of the art world itself. And that's certainly something that in my role I'm leaning heavily into, whether it's our sustainability strategy, whether it's our HR strategy, whether it's how we present ourselves and collaborate with the world.
Do you have family relationships that just span generations, or do you...
Absolutely.
And then how does that balance against, what's the sort of new collector? What's the new collector look like? And
well, I'll tell you a perfect example. An example of a picture which spans the breadth of Christie's and will hopefully go forward into our history is in July we're offering a work by Titian. It's a very early work called Rest on the Flight to Egypt. It dates to about 1510. Now that painting was last offered at auction at Christie's in 1878, and it will be offered again in July in the same room where it was sold in 1878, but this time looking forward to a new buyer.
Wow.
Isn't that extraordinary?
That's so cool. What is it, how do you sort of retain the sort of founding spirit of a place like Christie's? How is that sort of carried forward from one sort of version of Christie's into the next?
I think we're lucky that the staff who come to Christie's, we do it because we want to be there. And we're passionate about the objects, we're passionate about what we do, and we love working together. I always say that I get up to work and I'm excited to come into the office because I love my colleagues, I love interacting with them, and I love the passion of you come downstairs and you see beautiful things on the wall. And I think so with coming with that, there is a spirit, there's a shared sense of purpose. But we are owned by a family, we're owned by a great family of collectors, and that spirit from them goes down into our ranks, that we are always thinking first with our integrity, with collectors in mind. We're not thinking purely from a business perspective. One of the mantras that is instilled in us is it's not necessarily what you do, it's how you get there. It's what your path looks like so that you always get that right.
In a leadership position, what are the types of changes that you'd like to make that you think would, sort of continue to make Christie's relevant to the world today?
Yeah, it's about cherishing that tradition and holding it very, very close. At your peril, do you forget the 250 years that came before you? But it's also looking forward. So if you look at our new buyers, they're a very particular group, and they're very different from what came before them. So roughly a third of our bidders at auction every year are new to the company. And of them, about a third are, I'm going to use the word millennial. It's very broad brush. I can't stand these terms, but for simplicity, let's call them millennials. Now, they're an amazingly powerful bunch, and they're coming in and they have different patterns from the collectors before. They collect cross-category. I think before, if you go back in time, collectors would often be passionate about one particular area, one or two, whereas now the new buyers, they look across. They've got a breadth of knowledge. They don't keep in one swimming lane. They love contemporary art. They love artists who are speaking the same language as them. And of course, they love digital. They're passionate about digital. We now have about 80% of our auctions are online. But they also care about what you do and what you say. They want to know your sustainability strategy. We are the only major auction house to have a sustainability strategy, which we brought out in 2021. We're also very clear about responsible culture. That matters for the next generation, so it really matters to us.
What sorts of other services beyond auction does Christie's offer? And can you bring those service lines to life a little bit?
So, well, my job before this one was working in private sales, which is brokering deals off auction. So that's if you want to buy a picture or sell a picture right now, we can make that connection for you. And that was a relatively small part of the business over the years. But then during COVID in particular, it rose enormously. We were about 20% of Christie's sales at one point. And again, that speaks to a new kind of collector. You don't want to wait for an auction. You want it now. And there are specific things you're looking for, and we can go and find that for you now because, of course, we've got 250 years of data in our back pockets to know who owns what and where it is. But then around that, look, we have a valuation service where we come and value the property you have in your house. We have Christie's Education, which is an arm where we can share information about art, where we can bring people in to the art world.
I remember reading some statistics about how many people globally engaged with Christie's online auctions. I think it was during COVID. Did you see a significant surge in the online auction market during that period, or had it been pretty consistently growing?
So it had started and been consistently growing, but then it completely exploded because it was the only way to interact with the auctions. What you see now is that there is still a great interest of digital interaction and a lot of online, but you cannot take away from the theatre of auction. The major auctions, the really high value auctions, are still in the room. It's just that you've layered the digital element on top.
Do you think it would be a bit of a loss if the online auctions sort of superseded the glamour and the theatre of the in-person?
Do you know? I think I would be surprised if they ever completely supersede. History may prove me wrong there, but when you've been in an auction room, you cannot equal the power of being in an auction room. And whether you're on the phone to someone who is standing in for you or whether you're standing there yourself, it is absolutely extraordinary. But it's a moment in history when the auctioneer puts the gavel down on a price. That's part of the work's provenance. The Titian that was sold in 1878 was sold in that room for a price, and it will be sold in the same room for a price. That's history. I'm not sure you can quite equal that online.
Can you bring to life what the in-person auction experience is like? Because I'm not sure that many of the listeners perhaps have been in an auction.
Been in auction, right.
How does it work?
They may well not have done, absolutely. Well, you have an auctioneer who stands at the front of the room, and I will say that back in the day, that auctioneer was always male. At Christie's, we've worked incredibly hard to ensure that we have gender parity. So for our major sales, the auctioneer you've got a 50% chance that it's a lady. He or she stands up at the front and she offers the work. So the work is behind him or her. So let's just say it's our Titian. And they start with an estimate. At the moment, the estimate for the Titian is 15 to 20 million pounds. The auctioneer starts with a number that's below that and starts to take bids in the room. So whether that's along the side, my colleagues and I will be on the phone to collectors, so we will be executing bids on their behalf, or you may have collectors in the room who'll be raising a paddle. You also now, of course, have online, so you have people who could be behind their laptop in the middle of the Maldives and they click a button to bid.
What if you do a bit of an only fools and horses and accidentally raise your paddle?
It doesn't happen actually as much as you think. People are quite controlled where in that moment you sit on your hands.
How do you manage mistakes?
Yeah, well, they don't happen that often, but if they do, you have a human being auctioneer who can spot them. Okay. And thank goodness for that. They happen very rarely. They really do.
Can you just describe what a reverse auction is in that case?
A reverse auction?
Yeah. Is that even a thing?
That's not even a thing.
Have I just made it up?
Yeah, I think you've made it up.
Where you start the other way around?
No, we don't do
that.
Does
that not exist?
No.
No. Okay. Well,
no, in fact, you really don't, because what you want is to start low to get people's interest.
Yeah.
And you want people to start bidding, and that's how you go up.
Right, okay. Maybe that's just a weird thing I've made up in my mind.
I'd love to hear more about
another.
That's a whole other podcast.
It's another Only Fools and Horses thing, perhaps. What are your career highlights? Are there some really seminal moments that you've just really stood out to you?
There are many. I think for me, increasingly now, we are bringing works to auction that are being sold for charitable causes, and so obviously it's not our charity, it's not our work, but we're very proud to be the vehicle for bringing the works to auction. An example where just after COVID, a work by Banksy was brought forward to sale called Game Changer, and the proceeds were for the NHS. And it's a beautiful little work of a little boy, and he's holding a doll, and instead of it being an action hero, which he's discarded, he's holding a nurse. Now, it was estimated for a few million, and it actually made £16 million, all of which went to the NHS. 16 million pounds. And then even more beautifully, the buyer of it, he donated it back, so it currently is in Great Ormond Street Hospital on the wall.
That really is a wonderful.
It was utterly beautiful to watch. It was not just that the work had been donated, it was not just that it was bought, it was how many people were bidding it up, because there was a collective belief in the importance of this moment.
That's a beautiful story. How has the world of luxury changed, or even the term? How has that changed in your eyes?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the evolution of luxury, because I I feel that particularly in the last couple of years, luxury and art have started crossing over to each other a lot more than they ever did before. Again, back to my point about collectors and swimming lanes, I feel that again the different paths of what we do are starting to come together, and you see that outside Christie's with collaborations. The obvious being perhaps Kusama and Louis Vuitton doing a collaboration a few years ago, which led to a handbag. Now, for those who don't know, Yayoi Kusama is a very, very, very famous living artist, and one of her most famous pieces is sculptures in the shape of pumpkins, and they're beautifully colourful and fabulous. And as part of her collaboration with Louis Vuitton, she did a series of handbags in the shape of pumpkins. So literally art meeting luxury. They now come up at auction with us because, of course, they were limited edition, but they come up for auction with us. And we sold one recently this year for £25,000. So I would never have expected that a decade ago. And now that's something that you're really starting to see. It's the crossing of paths. For us, we touch on luxury in that we, of course, sell jewellery and watches. We're very proud to do so, also handbags. But we also sell collections that rub up against luxury. So we sold Elizabeth Taylor's jewels, fabulous, some years ago. We've sold Audrey Hepburn's dress from Breakfast at Tiffany's, absolutely gorgeous,
wow. Very
small, I must say. And we have coming up this summer, we have gowns and personal effects owned by Vivienne Westwood, which the late Vivienne Westwood has agreed, it's her partner who's selling them on her behalf, and they're all going to charities. The funds will go to charities that meant a lot to her. That's
amazing. What part do you think scarcity plays in modern luxury? Everything about an auction is to do with scarcity.
Well, that's right. That's the difference, isn't it? The difference is scarcity. It's the provenance, the quality, and the scarcities. Now, I'll give you an example. Last year, we were very lucky to sell a beautiful collection of books that was owned by Charlie Watts, the drummer in Rolling Stones. So little known fact that he actually collected rare books. One of them was a copy of The Great Gatsby. And it wasn't just a copy of The Great Gatsby. It was a first edition, and it had been inscribed by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And the inscription said, "For Harold Goodman, the original Gatsby of this story, with thanks for letting me reveal these secrets of his past." So who was Harold Goodman? Well, he was a screenwriter at MGM, and he and F. Scott Fitzgerald worked together for a while when they were young screenwriters. You get the sense that maybe there was a little bit of camaraderie there, because the inscription goes on to say it's dedicated as being from Alcatraz, cell box 17, and I should get out soon, send my love to the mob. Perhaps they didn't have the best time, I don't know. But so the difference for me is that you could go and buy a copy of The Great Gatsby tomorrow online, you could download it, you could watch the film. But truest of luxury is to hold in your hands the first edition inscribed by F. Scott to the person who he based Gatsby on and formerly owned by a Rolling Stone.
Like the symbolism, context, and the story behind the story. I mean, in your job, you must engage with the most amazing stories.
It's wonderful. Storytelling, I think, is one of our favourite parts, because we are all human beings. And look, particularly when people are buying from Christie's, this is the passion part of their life. This is the moment where you're engaging with their hearts and them as people. So for me, the story behind is probably one of the most important parts of how we're presenting works.
And how do you see the role of collaborations with luxury brands evolving? I mean, you've spoken a little bit to this, but do you think that will play an increasingly important part in luxury?
Yeah, certainly I do. I think it's really important that we do. I think that collaborations generally are the future of the business. And I think collaborations with luxury brands, there's a huge amount more we can do there. And there's a huge amount more to invest there.
I mean, there's so many examples of quite unexpected collaborations today, you know, whether it's sort of Dr. Martens, who aren't traditional luxury, but they now have collections at the National Gallery and the Met. The collaboration between sort of Tiffany and Nike.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's just really, like even Patagonia and North Face, you know, there's so many collaborations that sort of transcend the luxury category and are far more playful.
Right.
Are you seeing more of those types of things?
Well, yeah, I feel that we're a little bit more willing to just take risks now. And maybe that's the last few years, maybe it's post-COVID. You know, we're more willing to put our brands against other brands who have the same values or maybe the same interest in risk, as opposed to a perfect brand alignment. moment that used to be the days before. I think also we're blurring the lines of what is art. For us, it was in digital art. Who would have thought that digital art could take such an extraordinary position? And a work by Refik Anadol, who's one of the most famous digital artists out there, is now in the Museum of Modern Art in America. That's a sea change. You wouldn't have seen that. You wouldn't have expected that 5 or 10 years ago. And so I think that speaks to the way that we're trying to look. And again, it's that the constant push that is on my mind is to remember my 250 years behind me, but to also think about what is the legacy for the generation ahead. And all of that involves trying to think differently from how you have expected to think, and to try and break your own mental barriers and challenge your own ideas about what looks right.
What's your perspective on NFTs, digital art? Can you bring that side of the industry to life and what you've seen from your position at Christie's?
Right. It's about quality. Okay, so digital art has existed in some shape or form for some years now. It really became a part of public consciousness when we sold a work called Beeple a few years ago. And it was a piece of digital art, and we sold it. Happy to say we didn't know what it would make. We didn't even put an estimate on it. And it made $69 million. Wow. And that was the kind of watershed moment of actually NFTs are here and they're real. And from then on as a business, we focused on quality. So we didn't just offer every NFT going, try and make a buck. We very much focused on saying, what are the good NFTs with the real meaning, with the real purpose? So indeed, we were pleased to work with Refik Anadol on a dedicated NFT that he sold, and a number of other very special organizations that have done some really good. There's a lot of giving back in the world of digital art. Again, little known fact, but actually a huge amount of money is raised for charity by a lot of the artists in digital world. So for me, there is a place. The artists and the buyers of the future grew up in the digital age. So digital art will always be a medium for them. Even if it isn't for these ancient dinosaurs like us, it seems a little strange. It will be part of the canon in the future.
How are people displaying their works of digital art? How do you display them at Christie's?
Yeah, well, we have a lot of fun with that, because instead of having a painting on a wall next to another painting, we take over a room so that you can really get the effect of a piece of digital art. And I think probably most clients who buy them do something similar. They want to have them up, they want to share them.
And then I'm quite interested, what about things like smart contracts and how money is redistributed on second sale or on third sale? Do you think what do you think the impact of that will have on the art resale industry?
That is a complicated one. All I can say is I will always support artists benefiting from their work coming to auction.
Okay. What are your fears around things like AI and the impact of AI on creativity?
We have a lot to learn about AI. And maybe it's just my natural optimism and curiosity, but I'm really excited to see what it brings. So far, when I've met artists who use AI, they find it as a benefit to creativity. It's just another strand of creativity. It's not that it's taking over from them, but it's something that brings about another series of ideas, another flow of ideas. So to me, from that perspective, I think it's rather exciting. I think that we'll see some really interesting works that flow with AI. In the same as digital art, I would have found that an extraordinary concept 10 years ago. But actually, for the really high-quality artists using digital art, again, it's another way of expressing themselves. I mean, the most wonderful example is David Hockney, one of our greatest living artists, is hugely into digital art and produces art on iPads. Isn't that marvelous? You know, that's the perfect example of an evolution from someone who really could carry on making oil painting if he wanted, but he prefers to try out the new things.
And then I guess like in this sort of digital context, how do you manage sort of fakery?
Well, we have to be incredibly thorough. We work with artists, and therefore we know what they've produced in the same way that we work with people, so we therefore know who they are.
Is it like harder or easier than with physical objects? Maybe that's a stupid question.
No, it's not a stupid question, because the older an object is, the harder it is to know. If you're looking at old master painting, you have to go right down to the brass tacks of analysing the paint, looking at the brushstroke, and you have to know every line of the provenance right up until where the work is now. That is probably harder than looking at digital art, where the artist is alive and can say, yes, that was me.
I guess, you know, the symbolism of things has never been more important, and it's the stories that really give those symbols meaning. So how, as an organisation, do you ensure that those stories are really brought to life in the most evocative way? And how do you tell that story to your prospective clients?
That's right. So we have catalogues and we have a website. The very best way to bring a story to life is for the person to tell it themselves. So sometimes that's our specialists telling the story on behalf of the artist or the owner, but very rarely occasion it's actually the artists themselves. So a particular moment for me that was very profound was a few years ago we sold a beautiful painting by Tracy Emin. It's called Like a Cloud of Blood, and it was done during a period of ill health for her, and she was selling it for the studios that she set up in Margate, which is studios for young artists. So it was the ultimate moment of giving back. And she did a beautiful film for us, explaining why she was doing it, what the painting meant for her. It was incredibly profound. And I would say that work coming to auction was a really wonderful moment for all of us. And it was estimated something like £500,000 to £700,000, and it made about £2.2 million, all of which went into this beautiful organisation that she set up.
That's amazing. Do you think just everything becoming more digital has significantly opened up your collector base? I mean, this is kind of an obvious question.
No, you're right, it has. And many of our new buyers come through the luxury universe, through watches, wine, jewellery, handbags, and a lot of their bidding is online. So we meet them now online, and then the important manoeuvre for us is to then get to know them as people and to be able to engage them for their next bid.
How many secret buyers are there? I mean, you talk about meeting the people, meeting the collectors. How often do you just not meet them?
We have to meet them for compliance reasons.
You have to meet them, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have to know who our clients are.
So there'll be someone on someone's behalf if they want to remain anonymous.
And you still have to know who that someone is.
You still have to know who they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then you, I guess, track all the sales. You know exactly who owns what at any given time.
We try and keep an eye on where the major works are, and we try and know what our clients are looking for. It's really, really important because we need to serve them well. And a good look, maybe that's somewhere where AI will form a role in the future as a better way of matching what people are looking for.
When people buy things in a major auction, do they come and resell? Is it how often? What am I really trying to ask? Will they what's the average tenure? Do people hold on to these things for lifetimes, or do they often come back and resell? And I guess what's the balance between long-term collecting and sort of profiteering?
Yeah, most collecting is relatively long-term, if not very long-term, and because again, this is the part of your life which is passion. You could be some great entrepreneur, but the moment when you go and buy art is your heart, right? So we absolutely do also have a market where people buy and sell and trade, and that tends to be in the more contemporary areas where you have more works on the market and more buyers, so it's a natural affiliation. But it's still a lot of what people are doing is buying to collect. So it's not a universe of flippers where people are, something's coming in one week and out the other. It just doesn't really happen like that.
It doesn't, does it?
No.
What's the weirdest thing that you've sold? I mean, you spoke about a Spitfire earlier. That's quite cool.
Yeah, the Spitfire was cool.
What's the sort of most left field thing?
Well, dinosaur bones always do amaze me, and there was a dodo skeleton.
A dodo skeleton.
And, it's very small actually. It's about this big. So sweet. And that's mad. But actually, meteorites are one of the weirdest and most wonderful thing that we sell.
That's cool.
Because you really have to understand what a meteorite is. And I hand on heart, I'm not an expert in meteorites. And so when you first look at them, they are it's a lump of rock to the immediate eye, but when someone explains to you and explains that it has space dust on it and that it came from whichever planet and landed here and there, it's absolutely extraordinary.
And do you do at the in-person auctions, so you do like a proper presentation, really bringing the object to life so that everyone has a true understanding of what the thing is, and it's centered around a collection of things that all fit into. Can you bring to how do you organise what goes into which auctions?
Auctions are gathered over maybe the course of 6 months, and in that time you have a collection you have groups of works that come from various owners, and also you probably maybe have a group of works that's come from one person. That tends to be the flow, and we put them together and we do an exhibition which lasts for between 5 and 7 days before the auction itself. So it's quite short.
Yeah, that is quite short.
That's just because the flow of auctions, there are so many of them. But
how many are there?
Well, gosh, globally, I actually couldn't even tell you how many it is now. There's a lot.
UK,
now that
roughly?
Not even. I couldn't even tell you that because you've got online auctions running alongside major auctions in the rooms. But the key factor here is that in that moment before a work is sold, it's on view and it's on view to the public. Absolutely anyone can come in and everyone is invited. I think that's something that people don't appreciate about Christie's. We're open from 9:30 to 4:30 every weekday and at weekends. And what we're saying is come in. So we may have a a Leonardo da Vinci on the wall, which, yes, is probably beyond most people's price range, but anyone can come in and have a look at it. And there's a stolen moment where you have this week before something goes off and becomes owned by someone else, where you can go and have a look at it and you can stand in front of something really extraordinary.
When you organise the collections, so say you have a Da Vinci, say just a casual Da Vinci.
Yes.
Will you sort of kind of curate some other unexpected things from that period, or that sort of work alongside whatever that painting depicts, or how varied are you with how you kind of assemble these collections?
You tend to want a range of price points and a range of works, because that's what's most appealing to the people who are coming to look around. But yes, if you have a major work, it's a good opportunity to go to the people who own related works and say, we're selling this. Now could be a good context for you. You obviously don't want to sell two of the same thing, but something related where you're going to be drawing the great collectors to come and see your Leonardo da Vinci. Yes, it's not a bad moment to have something else up. We have to think incredibly carefully about that, because our first job is to the owners of these works, to get it right and to give them the best advice. So we curate incredibly carefully on that basis to say, is it the right moment to sell?
People are like, is it quite addictive collecting? Do you have like a sort of entry point, and then you sort of find these sort of first time collectors suddenly start really buying into the sort of world of collecting? It's kind of inherent to us.
Do you know what? All the collectors I speak to say the same thing, is that it is addictive. And I sadly don't have the funds to be a collector myself, but I find the job addictive. I find the market addictive, because there's always hidden discoveries. You may feel like you've been collecting Monet for years, but then something comes up that no one knew about, or that is a totally new version of what he was doing. And it's fascinating, really exciting. And I think certainly back to my point about the discovery of art, I discovered very early on just the alphabet of art, like what to look for in a picture. But from there I've expanded, and no matter where I go, I'm always finding new markets or new artists or new types of craft, which make it all the more exciting for me. So for a collector's journey, they tend to come in, there tends to be a spark, something that draws them in, something that makes them bid for the first time.
You could have bought one thing.
If I could have bought one thing.
Money being no object, but you are just getting started.
I mean, I'm just getting started, so that's right.
What will you have bought?
Do you know, I would have bought the Banksy.
Really?
I would have bought the Banksy. It was such a beautiful image, if nothing else. And then the why and the where. I think I really would have bought the Banksy. It's beautiful.
Really, you'd have bought the Banksy. That's interesting.
And I would, if I was collecting, if my millions had come in already, I would also collect old master drawings. I find them the most fascinating category, because it's the very, very basis of a painting.
Yeah.
It's the truest art form.
What's the ratio of new versus existing collectors, and how has that changed?
Well, if it's about a third of our bidders every year are new, it's pretty powerful, actually, of new buyers. I mean, if you think about how many people in the world are buying art every day, if a third of them every year are new, that's actually quite a strong group.
A third every year are new.
Yeah.
So you add on a third onto an existing collector base.
And not everyone sticks around. That'd be great if every single one of that third stuck around, but a significant portion do.
I mean, collecting something, I would imagine when you start, you do to your dying day.
I think you keep an interest. You sometimes see a cycle of collecting starts, and then it really, really grows, and then it peaks. And then perhaps as you in life are retiring, you buy a little bit less and you sit in and you enjoy. But then steps in your next generation, that steps in your children, and what do they feel about the collection? What do they want? And certainly in my experience, there's a very emotional connection to the collection of your parents. And whenever I'm speaking to the next generation, I always say how lucky they are, because you have a connection with your parents that will completely outlive them, because it's their passion. It's what they built when they cared. It's what they did. And you can have that on your walls forever.
You're saying that now people are collecting in a far, I'm not going to say scattergun, but perhaps broader. Let's say broader.
Yeah.
That the collections are shallower but broader, reflecting a wider array of life interests.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still pretty deep, but they're just broader. Rather than me collecting Dutch old masters for my entire life, I now could collect one of the greatest of every piece of art. I mean,
so it's how you categorize in your mind. It's
how you categorize it. You're looking for greatness. You're looking for what touches you.
A style of greatness rather than just a traditional taxonomy that defines one thing as falling into one time period.
That's right. It's not getting in deep into one subject. It's sort of getting in deep into various ones. And again, you're looking for what moves you. So it's more personal.
Of society, isn't it?
I think it is reflection.
As we were saying earlier, you hate the word millennial. It's because whether you're 16 or 60, we maybe are driven by interests that you can't categorize by demographic or all sorts of conventional categorization mechanisms.
Well, right. But what does luxury mean to you? That's the question, isn't it? And to me, luxury is personal. It's deeply, deeply personal. What I consider a luxury in what I do day to day is going to be different. For some people, it's going to be taken on a helicopter to the roof of the Burj Khalifa and, I don't know, given a Michelin-starred lunch. For me, actually, I'm afraid that I'm a deeply simple person. My luxury is something incredibly, incredibly simple. And I think then you look at the same thing in tastes.
What is your luxury?
Do you know my luxury? I would go for a walk in the park near my house with my children and have just nothing but the silence of them and the trees. It sounds so ridiculous, but that is to me the most perfect luxury.
Got children who are silent.
Yes, I mean that is true. They are, unfortunately, they would ruin it.
I wish I had your children.
if I could maybe mute them or just dimmer switch them, but the experience of being with them.
My luxury, for totally opposite reasons, has become airports purely because
you're not with your children.
I've got a little bit of solace.
Your children may be younger than mine. I'm just going to make a bet there. But so luxury is personal. But I think the perfect example of a newer type of collector was the great Paul Allen. So we sold his collection a few years ago. It was an enormously valuable collection. It went for a total of $1.6 billion. And hold the phone, every single dollar went to charity. He sold his entire collection after his death for philanthropic causes. Absolutely extraordinary. What an amazing thing to do. But what also defined that collection is he had collected the best of every category. So it wasn't just one. It wasn't just the best Dutch old masters. There was a Seurat representing Impressionism. There was a Botticelli for old masters. And I could go on. It's one of everything that was great. There's a Freud for post-war art. Absolutely fascinating. A Turner. He had a Turner. Now that's very unusual, but I think if that's the apex of collecting, it's still the style that you're going to see more of.
Maybe this is a stupid question, but is there like a community of collector? When someone's sold something, do they have any right to know what then happens to it? Or is there any interest from either the acquirer or the seller in kind of keeping in contact or understanding where the work is, or any rights to enjoy that work? Or
I think you pass the baton to the next generation. I think you do. Look, I mean, I think it's a wonderful, if you're a major collector and one of your works goes to a museum, ultimately, that's a wonderful thing.
Of course, yeah. So we always ask our guests the same 4 questions.
Okay.
The first is, what most irritates you about your industry?
Oh, I love it. I'm quite an irritable person, so I could come up with quite a few things. But my very first point is actually the lack of diversity. We've done a huge amount at Christie's to try and increase the diversity of both the artists we sell and the staff that we employ. We now have some very strict rules for our major sales that we want the artists to be 50-50 gender represented. We also, when we look at our staff, in 2021, we created something called the Christie's Fund, which was a fund dedicated to broadening recruitment within the arts. So whether it's education and mentorship and working with various organisations. I think we work with something like 30 organisations now. But that is just the very beginning, the very, very beginning of a very long mission that we have.
This is kind of an extension of that, and perhaps a stupid question, but do you think Christie's plays a role in value creation, for example, for perhaps previously neglected sources of great art?
I think we reflect the market, and it's our duty to look at where the market is going to be and how it should be. So in that respect, yes. I think that...
Because your word carries a lot of weight.
I think we all share that responsibility, and we at Christie's have to do our part very, very, very much. And I think quite often we are a reflection of the market. So in some ways, we're just merely here to reflect because people bid, we don't bid.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right that we need to be driving those forces. So if we're bringing in underrepresented artists, it's because we're saying they should be there, and we're bringing those bids in, and that's an absolutely basic duty.
Yeah.
And if I segue to our sustainability strategy, we're the only major auction house to have a sustainability strategy, but look, we don't keep it just for us. One of the projects we have is trying to move from shipping works by plane to shipping works on actual ships, like real life ships. And on a ship, you've got a container. Now, we don't necessarily fill a container. So we've been working with various organizations such as dealers and galleries to say, do you want to go in on the container with us? And that's the most minor thing. But it's really important that that's what we're doing, and that's what we're trying to lead at the front of, because it matters.
How do people pick you over a different auction house? What is because presumably a lot of that is in the brand and the manner of service, or does it come down more to specialism? Or
so I look we never compare ourselves to the other auction houses, and we don't focus on them, we focus on us. So what we focus on is our values and our expertise. So if someone was to pick us, I hope it would be, firstly, because we have the best expertise in the business, and second, because our values shine through. We work as a team, we want to do right, we want to give the right advice, we want their trust.
Where do you see Christie's sort of being in the next 10 years if all goes to plan?
I would hope that we are holding on to our values and looking forward. And I give you my personal example of what that looks like, which was in October last year during Frieze Week. We invited an artist called Laquena McIver to take over our building. So our building, which we've been in for over 250 years, was taken over by this young female artist who's based here in the UK. And she covered the stairs, the windows, she covered the pillars with this amazing works of art that she does, amazing colour. And what we were saying there was that our beautiful old building is in the hands of an artist, because an artist is at the centre of what we do. It's also in the hands of a young creative artist, because we're looking forward. We're looking at where our market will be in 10 years.
Interesting. What most concerns you about the world we're all leaving our kids?
Many, many things. I will say, from the arts perspective, I'm really concerned about funding for our museums. We are so lucky in this country to have such extraordinary museums, and that they are open for free. The access is free. It's an extraordinary gift that we have, and it's an extraordinary gift to our children. And I really hope that we can find a way to give them the funds and the support they need to do that.
Plus there's in-person interactions and there's opportunities to bond with each other. That's using, right. Like history or, like these magnificent pieces of art as a way to bond with each other. That's I think is so important as we become more digital.
Important. 100%. And look at your own history. If you go and stand in the National Gallery, you look at works of art by the great works of art, either for Britain, by British artists, standing there, and you have a connection back to history. It's literally a physical representation of a history that you can't touch it, you can't know it, but you can look at it.
If you had to give up your job tomorrow, what would you do?
Perhaps bouncing on my last point, I must admit I wake up every morning and I think it's really time I went into politics. I think it's time to get involved.
I'll patiently wait for you to do something slightly better than what's happening at the moment.
No comments.
Which I would definitely find quite exciting. And on that, what is the most exciting thing for you personally in the next 5 years?
I want to see where Christie's can go. I feel a huge amount of excitement in the company at the moment. I feel an enormous amount of passion. I feel that we're riding the changes in a way that I find very positive, and I'm incredibly excited to see how that goes. With every season, I see an impact of what we're trying to do, and I see a change, and I see an evolution towards something that to me looks incredibly exciting. So I just cannot wait to be part of that.
What a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a real joy speaking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.